Growing up, I played on a wide range of older gaming consoles like the PS1, Gamecube, and Wii. I even remember owning a PSP and a DS at some point, and both me and my brother would frequently play co-op games together after school or on a Saturday. We played a lot more of the everyday and mainstream games you would have expected to see in the mid-2000s, stuff like Mario Kart Double Dash, Star Fox Assault, Wii Sports, and others. Then there were games we usually got for our birthdays or Christmas, which primarily consisted of animated movie games like The Incredibles, Ratatouille, or the SpongeBob movie game. Those still have a special place in my heart, and I distinctly remember playing stuff like Cars or Over the Hedge on my Game Boy Advance SP. A lot of them played awkwardly, and some might have not had the budget compared to stuff like Mario Kart, but they were still highlights of my childhood nonetheless. The GameCube I had growing up, and still have, lost its memory card at some point, and for whatever reason, we never bothered replacing it. So, for a few years, likely from 2005 into the turn of the decade, me and my brother would play games knowing that as soon as we turned our GameCube off, our progress would be lost entirely. There were very few games we picked up and would be able to finish in the same sitting, so there was a lot of content in the second half of games that we just never got to. Despite not having somewhere to save all of our game data, there's still one game that I was absolutely addicted to around this time that I was still willing to restart over and over countless times. That game was Extreme G3 Racing. Here's a quick rundown for context. Extreme G3 Racing, which I'll refer to as XG3 for the remainder of this video, was originally released for the PS2 in August 2001, and was later made for the GameCube in November of the same year. It was published by Acclaim Entertainment, a company that had moderate success throughout the 90s and early 2000s. They've done a lot of home console ports for popular arcade games like Mortal Kombat and Crazy Taxi. Some of their notable publishings include the NBA Jam games for the Game Boy Advance, the North America release of Worms 3D, and numerous racing games such as ATV Quad Power Racing 2, which I also had in my collection, and South Park Rally. They can't all be gems, man. XG3 was the third game in a series of 4 racing games, the first one releasing in 1997, and each iteration being released 2 years apart until Acclaim filed for bankruptcy in 2004. The game is set in the 23rd century, and 6 teams of 2 are competing in this Extreme G racing thing. That's about all that matters for the plot, as most racing games during this era didn't usually have one at all. Just take a look at Mario Kart. It's the characters in the Mario world racing each other, and that's it, but it's super fun. When you first boot up XG3, you are greeted with a little cinematic intro for the game. It definitely shows its age now, but I always liked watching this as a kid. Live, run, generic verbs, this is so awesome. It does remind me a bit of the first Gran Turismo game, which also had around a 2-minute cinematic intro whenever you booted it up. Once you're actually in the main menu, you can select between a career mode, time trials, and the XG Mall, but we'll take a look at the career mode first. In the XG career mode, you start out with the 250 G League races, which consist of 9 levels and are grouped up in sets of 3. You don't have to get first place in all the races, but your average place per 3 races has to be above a certain threshold in order for you to continue. If you're unable to meet the threshold, you have to start your entire league over, unless you were cheeky and managed to save your game before a race started, in which case you could just load it up again from there. I did this a lot when I was 8 or 9 years old, and I thought I was a freaking super genius. Depending on your placement per race, you receive a certain amount of money that you can spend in the XG Mall, a place to get stuff like engine upgrades, and choose from a generous selection of weapons like heat-seeking missiles, a destabilizer which prevents your opponents from being able to steer for a brief time window, a railgun, and so on. You can also buy upgrades for your ammo and shields, which become more useful in the higher tier races later on. After you complete the 250G League, you're promoted up to 500G, and you play through the base 9-level loop again, but with slightly more aggressive opponents, and you have to manage your increased speed more effectively. Then you get to 750G and 1000G, at which point you unlock the final level of the game, Pion 6. I'll be honest, when I was little I found it a little annoying that I had to technically play every level 4 times before I could reach the final level, but playing it now it only takes about 45 minutes or less to cycle through each loop, placing the game's completion time at a generous 3 hours. Of course, that could be because I've spent over 100 hours playing this as a kid, and the handling comes fairly easy to me now. Time Trials is about what you'd expect. You play essentially any level you've already played in the league races, and you can practice turns and optimize when you boost to achieve a faster lap time. One feature I still don't understand about this game is the fact that you have to use your in-game money to purchase each track in Time Trials. I've seen other racing games do this, and I mean, I'm not gonna need all the excess money I have once I complete the career mode, but still, like, what's the point? It just never made sense to me, but I guess that at the very least, it can serve as a brutal lesson to kids that nothing in this world is free. The level design in XG3 is pretty impressive for what it is, my favorite two being Atradaitoshi and Megalopolis 7. Let it also be noted that nearly every level in this game is difficult to pronounce for no reason whatsoever. The devs are trolling. The environments of each level range from a crowded futuristic megacity to a canyon in the middle of nowhere to the middle of the Arctic. Realistically, it would be super inconvenient for them to build a complex racetrack out in the middle of nowhere. I know the devs likely wouldn't have expected anyone to look that far into it, but I still find it a little funny. There are a lot of massive incline and decline sections, multiple paths on the tracks to choose between, underwater sections, tunnels, corkscrews, challenging turns, places where the track crosses over itself and back again, and plenty of places to pick up extra shields and ammo. The game's beginning track, Muon Harbor, eases new players into the game by offering what is more or less an elliptical track with no crazy turns or fast decisions to make. By the time you reach Crystallaria, the game's third track, you already have to deal with using your bumper buttons to make it around sharp corners without slamming into the side of the track and tanking a third of your shield, all while your opponents are trying to shoot at you. Since you're required to replay levels at higher speeds, the levels become significantly more challenging even if you're aware of which turns are coming up. Even just playing races in the 500G League, it's easy to forget how sharp your next turn is and you end up severely damaging your bike as a result. The fast-paced nature of this game is both a pro and a con in my opinion, because if you do pay attention to the design of each track, there's almost always an opportunity to slip ahead of your opponent if you time it right. Whether you hug the inside of a sharp corner, use your boost on a long straight section, or wait for the track to go completely vertical to use your boost. It can also be a con because many of the levels have long sections with a tight curve going around either in a U shape or a full-on corkscrew shape, and if your opponent drops micromines on the ground in front of you, it's nearly impossible to dodge. You're probably like, Aurora, that's a super specific issue, but okay, let me tell you. When you get to the 500G League and higher, everyone uses these micromines, and they're legitimately the most infuriating weapon in the game. Just using them once throws out like 6 of them, and sometimes they move in random directions, so it's really difficult for you to kind of plan out a route to move around them without getting hit. Your best option is to pray that you miss their attack and immediately use as much boost as it takes to pass them. For those wondering, yes, there are cheats for this game. I used the infinite shield cheat that kind of cheesed my way through the last couple of races in 1000G League, but it wasn't from a lack of trying. I spent an entire afternoon trying to stop my bike from spontaneously combusting, but it's nearly impossible to avoid walls at such high speeds. I'm also just bad at video games. I did all this to reach the final level, Pion 6, which is actually a deceivingly easy course. There's a lot of smooth turns, rolling hills, and it was clearly designed to be handled at high speeds. I wasn't disappointed since you really have to sweat your way through the last leg of the career mode to reach this course, which definitely rewards you for your hard work. For those who haven't seen my earlier video essay style content, I always make it a point to talk about the soundtrack of a game. In recent years, I've come to enjoy games like Minecraft, Celeste, Doom Eternal, and a handful of indie titles that have a really well-crafted soundtrack. I really appreciate a game that focuses on music or sound, or at least makes that a big part of its aesthetic. XG3 is no exception. This game's soundtrack consists of early 2000s techno and rave music, and it's a genre that both sounds old and new in 2023 because there's still plenty of artists that make this kind of stuff. Each track has its own unique music to accompany the action, and the music itself is highly energetic. It's the kind of music I'd probably want to play on Spotify when playing other racing games, but I think that's because this is one of the first games I actively played as a kid, so I sometimes feel the need to try and recreate the feeling I get from XG3's music and fast-paced gameplay. My favorite song is on Atradaitoshi, and I think it's a combination of the synths they use and the sample of some dude saying, "Hey DJ, give me a fat beat." It almost sounds like the kind of upbeat stuff that earlier Sega games would have. It also reminds me of both the Lethal League soundtrack and Jet Set Radio, which are phenomenal, like upbeat EDM soundtracks. I absolutely love these. Even if you never get the opportunity to play XG3, the entire game's OST is on YouTube and it makes for some energetic background music when you're playing other games. This is going to be a short section, but it's nearly impossible to be reviewing a game like XG3 and not mention F-Zero, which is a racing game series that far surpasses XG3 in popularity. F-Zero games were released around the same time as those in the Extreme G series, and have comparable level design and fast-paced nature to them. Most F-Zero games were released in what I would consider the golden age of Sega's video game music. A vast majority of Sega's releases from the late 90s until the mid-2000s just had a really memorable soundtrack for me, and I think it might have just been because I'm a fan of that drum and bass, techno, and more primitive sounding EDM music compared to what we see today. I think in a way, XG3 got overshadowed by the popularity of F-Zero, but I don't think F-Zero is a bad series at all. I'm sure if I ended up growing up playing F-Zero as opposed to Extreme G3 Racing, I would have a lot more to say about it, but you know, no disrespect to the F-Zero community or anything. I probably should actually just sit down and play one of the games and see how I like it, but I might just save that for another video. Originally, this video was going to be a breakdown of a specific element of XG3 I liked, but if I'm being honest, I wanted this to be more of an open-ended video for my audience. Furthermore, I think XG3 is a game that doesn't excel at any specific element of its experience, but rather all of the elements combine into a cohesive and engaging experience. I want to make it clear that although this is my favorite racing game for the Gamecube, I acknowledge that there's going to be a lot of you that disagree with me, and I'm okay with that. This is just something that I happened to come across when I was a kid and got hooked on really early, and I think it's cool to share my experience with other people. I really like talking about the games I grew up playing because those past experiences have a big influence on the stuff I like now. XG3 isn't a perfect game, sure, but it's a memorable one, for me at least. I recommend anyone with a physical GameCube or even an emulator to take a look at this game and let me know what you think. I recently bought a copy at a retro game store for under $10, so I imagine it's not an extremely hard title to find. Before I head out, I did have a few brief channel and life updates to discuss, so if you're not a regular returning Aurora XD viewer, I don't mind if you stay, but like you can go if you want. It won't hurt my feelings, I promise. First of all, I've just finished up all of my college work and I'm starting a full-time job next week. I'm not sure how this is going to affect my content, but I already upload about once every 3 months, so I don't think it'll make too big of a difference, but I will try to get on a more regular stream of content on YouTube. Streams will be less frequent and I'm trying to focus a little more on speedrunning. I kind of just want to dip my toes in that a little bit more. I've been doing Jump King and Only Up and a lot of the Rage games I feel like I could get faster at, but that's about it for streaming content. Secondly, me and my buddy Soaring Sloth just started our gaming and speedrunning podcast called The Basement Out Back, which will be in the description and on the end screen. I'm always trying to have a place for my viewers to kind of have a more consistent stream of stuff to watch, so the podcast channel is probably your best bet to go for the next couple of months. I'll see everyone in the next video, which should hopefully be in the next month or so. Thanks for watching.